Hello there. Welcome back to the Senate Podcast. This is going to be a quick episode. It's episode 32, I believe, and I'm on here by myself. So it's been 1 year since we started doing the Senate Podcast. So I wanted to just get a quick episode out about the last year. And it's 2023, it's the end of the year. There have been some huge games out. We've had a lot of episodes. There's been a lot of movies out. A lot has happened. So instead of having one huge episode about a million different things, I kind of just wanted to make a simple video about the last year. So this is really the second time I've been on here by myself talking, and it's not as easy as having somebody else on here like Tony, the co-host, to talk to. But over the last year, it's been fun. We've had many guests on. Tony has had one episode he did himself, an interview. I had one awesome interview. We kind of had almost like an interview where we both interviewed somebody. The joystick, that was a fun episode. We had a live episode, was super fun. But it's been 1 year, almost exactly, since we started this, and we're on episode 32. But we've had multiple episodes with different parts to that episode, and then just random videos that we didn't label episodes. So really, we're probably close to 40 or 45 videos total. You can actually check that out on YouTube. So like I said at the beginning, it's the Senate Podcast. Who knows how long the Senate Podcast will be around for, because honestly, if we keep wanting to put into this, what we're going to do is we're going to rebrand it, and I think we have a name for it. So I'm going to reach out to some artists. I have somebody working on a theme, a musical score for it. It's going to be fun because we want to take it to the next level, but we don't want to do that as the Senate Podcast, because the Senate Podcast was always something that was just almost like a joke, just something fun for us to do. But if we want to take this even more serious than we have been, we're going to rebrand it and do something a little bit different. But anyways, this episode is about essentially the biggest games of 2023. And, game of the year is not really a thing. It kind of used to be with the VGAs, the Video Game Awards. Then that stopped, and Jeff Keighley took over for TGAs, I guess you would call it, the Game Awards. It's a different organization than the Game Awards. But essentially, they're the nominees. You run through every category, whatever. They don't really mean much, but obviously there's a game that will come out as Game of the Year 2023. So who cares what wins each category or not? We just want to get on here and talk about our favorite games. So today it's just going to be me, and I'm going to run through the biggest games of the year and kind of my thoughts and opinions on that. Who knows if we'll have an episode about all the nominees, all the categories. If you go back to last year when we talk about the 2022 games, we go in depth and we honestly just go overboard. So with this, I kind of just want to talk about, the top 5 games or top 6 games? 6. Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Those are the essentially 6 biggest games of the year according to the judges. The nominees are selected by a global jury of individuals from more than 100 media publications and influencer outlets. So I'm reading off of Variety.com. I'll have it linked in the description, the exact article I'm reading from. So maybe I could go through these other categories real quick. Like I said, I want this to be kind of a quick video. Nothing crazy. I just want to get something out. You guys can see, the Senate Podcast, new episode, So let's get into it. Obviously, the biggest category is Game of the Year. I just list the 6 nominees for it. I have played 3 out of the 6. So I've played half of them. I actually have Resident Evil 4 right here beside me. I haven't played it yet, though. I will not be playing Baldur's Gate 3, not my type of game. And Alan Wake 2, I'm eager to jump into. I just haven't jumped into it yet. So, let's get into this. As you can see, Nintendo got 2 nominations for Game of the Year. It's almost a given because Nintendo is just always going to have nominations or nominees, for almost every category. That's just how popular Nintendo is and shows their quality. Honestly, I don't know if Mario Bros. Wonder should be on here. Not because it isn't a great game. It's fantastic. It's probably the best 2D game, 2D platformer, I should say, period, in the last 25 years. It completely, redoes what you expect for a Mario platformer. This is a fresh, like a refresh to the formula, like you saw in Mario, Super Mario World way back when. There probably hasn't been a 2D platformer like this since that game, actually. So maybe that's why it's on here, but it's a great game. I don't see it placing top 3 or top 2 or winning. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It's an insane game. I could see it placing top 3 or top 2. I don't really see it winning because both the games I just mentioned from Nintendo, Wonder and Tears of the Kingdom, they're actually sequels. Especially Tears of the Kingdom. Mario Wonder actually isn't a sequel. It's kind of like a reimagining of a formula, but still, I don't see it. And then Tears of the Kingdom is a sequel. It really just takes what the first one did, what was it, Breath of the Wild, and just completely adds to it. It reinvents it, but it just multiplies everything that was in that game by 1,000,000. And what's funny is every game on this list is a reimagining, a remake, or a sequel. There's no original game on this. So that's going to be an interesting conversation to see kind of Game of the Year is actually what's the best sequel, essentially, or remake. There's 2 Nintendo games on here. I like both these games. Tears of the Kingdom was a kind of like a zeitgeist game. Of course, it's the sequel to Breath of the Wild. It's going to be insane. Then you have the 4 other nominees. Let's just jump into Resident Evil 4 Remake. On Variety, they don't even have it listed as a remake. They just call it Resident Evil 4, which is actually misleading because it's not the original. So it is technically, whatever, Resident Evil 4, but it is the remake of the original Resident Evil. I've been playing Dead Space Remake. Dead Space Remake is incredible, and I hear that it is actually better than RE4. Now, I've watched a lot of gameplay and some playthroughs of RE4, not the entire game, but many parts of it. It's not really my cup of tea, the Resident Evil games. I think I think Capcom has some of the best developers. I think Resident Evil 2 Remake, 3 Remake, now 4 Remake are some of the best looking and playing and, performance and highest performing and high fidelity games that you can buy. Capcom is amazing when it comes to developing these remakes. So I actually think it should be on here. Now, is it top 6? I don't know, but is it worthy of, being a game of the year? Yeah, definitely. I think it was one of the best games of the year. Who cares if it was a remake or a reimagining? It was a game that came out this year, and it was incredible. So I don't know if it's even top 6. I don't think it'll get top 3 or top 2 or win, but it's a good choice to be on here. It was a stacked year. I'm gonna talk about some other games this year because it's almost like you can't narrow it down to 6, but the 6 we have here, we're just gonna go with those for the nominees. All right, moving on. Baldur's Gate 3. It's the most insane RPG, I guess, ever. From everything I've been hearing about it, I don't know much about it. I'm actually going to look it up now. Obviously, I've seen a lot about it. I've heard a lot about it. It's just not my thing. So what I hear is that it is insanely intricate. There's so much that goes into this. I'm going to read here off of its Wikipedia under reception. Baldur's Gate 3 received universal acclaim according to review aggregator website Metacritic, with 99% of critics recommending the game on aggregator OpenCritic. Okay. Critics praise the quality of the writing, including the detailed depiction of the Dungeons and Dragons setting of Faerun. The intertwined storylines, enabling alternate story moments and a large degree of player freedom, and the characters, particularly companions, that feel interesting and memorable. Critics also praise the production quality, including the voice acting, characters and facial animations, and detailed environments. The game's implementation of the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition rule set was well received. Okay, this isn't a podcast about this game, but it is getting like unanimous 9s and 10s out of 10s across the board. So Destructoid 10 out of 10, Digital Trends 5 out of 5, Eurogamer 4 out of 5, Game Informer 9.5 out of 10, and so on. IGN 10 out of 10. I know they hold a lot of credit there when it comes to Game of the Year. Obviously, I mean it's getting unanimous, perfect scores. OpenCritic is 99%. That's insane. If I use any of the outlets, I do like to use OpenCritic the most. So a 99% is insane. I could see Baldur's Gate 3 actually taking, the best game of the year 2023, but it's not in my top 20. Sorry. All right, Alan Wake 2. This game looks insane. I wish I could share somehow like screenshots or videos of this game. Just go look it up. But Alan Wake 2, absolutely insane. It's a sequel to, acclaimed, game Alan Wake. I don't know how it was received back in the day, Alan Wake. I wasn't a fan of the first one, actually. I don't know why. Maybe the mechanics of it, but the story and setting interest me a lot. So when I saw gameplay of Alan Wake 2, obviously I like the story, and they just made this game so interesting from a atmospheric perspective with modern engines and modern technology, consoles, all that. The game looks incredible. It performs at 60 FPS, looks insane. The premise is very interesting to me. It's a survival horror game developed by Remedy, published by Epic Games, in the Northern Light engine, single player. It just released, and it is, it has this critical acclaim already to it. I think it only released a few days before these nominations went out. So, I'm trying to find its wiki. Here we go. So if we go to reception here, where's its OpenCritic? Okay, Metacritic has it on the Xbox Series X and S at a 94 out of 100. That seems to be its highest rating right there. Everywhere else, it's almost unanimous 9s out of 10s, a little bit lower than Baldur's Gate 3. That's the only reason I don't see this winning, is because Baldur's Gate 3 is just, its reception is higher. But I think next to Baldur's Gate, it's going to be RE4 and Alan Wake 2, because the last game I want to talk about, Marvel Spider-Man 2. This is the game I want to take the most time on. So where are we at? We're at 14 minutes. Okay, for the rest of the time, we're going to talk about Spider-Man 2, because I beat it. I am very close to platinuming it. I'm just taking my time. So I just want to talk about Spider-Man 2. It'll be spoiler-free here for a little bit, but then I'm going to talk about some hot takes. So Spider-Man 2 PS5 wiki. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go to the wiki. We're going to go to reception. We're going to talk about how these things are being received, because this is how they determine the game of the year. It's based off a panel of judges. So, and they obviously take the, publications and whatnot into consideration. OpenCritic, it has a 98%. It's only 1% below Baldur's Gate 3, which is actually insane. So what is the OpenCritic for RE4 Remake? 98. So Spider-Man 2 and RE4 actually tied on OpenCritic. That's crazy. IGN holds a lot. So IGN gave RE4 a 10 out of 10, and IGN gave Spider-Man 2 an 8 out of 10. So that's gonna cause it right there to not become Game of the Year. Right there. So let's talk Spider-Man 2. The game is incredible. I think a lot of people are saying it is right, and comparing it to the first Spider-Man PS4 from Insomniac. People are saying Spider-Man 2 kind of sits right below it in terms of story and execution and stuff like that. But when you talk about the mechanics and the gameplay, this blows the first one out of the water. The traversal in this game, it makes you feel like Spider-Man like you never thought you would have before, because the first one was interesting, giving you the ability to become the wall crawler, but in this you become the symbiote. There's a layer added onto it. You become Venom. You know what I mean? You are the wall crawler with all of his, mechanics and whatnot, just like from the first game. But they add a whole nother layer, which is the symbiote. And of course, you get to play as Miles in this, which Miles, amazing character. He has so many cool mechanics himself with his Venom abilities and whatnot. So there's layers on layers in this game to where they take the first game with obviously the same New York map. One of the developers made a joke. What did you expect? New York 2? No, it's the same New York, but they added the boroughs to it this time, which was awesome. It was cool going around Brooklyn and Queens and stuff like that. It was cool going to the boroughs. And obviously they had to increase the traversal mechanics for this. So you got the web wings, you got different symbiote abilities and the Venom abilities to just make your way around New York like you would have never thought you could have in a game, in an open world game like this. But Insomniac, they're amazing when it comes to movement and abilities and mechanics in games. I mean, think of games like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, or oh my, what's the one? Sunset Overdrive. The mechanics in that. I mean, if you take, go way back in the day to when they made Sunset Overdrive. What year was that? 2013. Um, 2014. So go back to 2014 and you play Sunset Overdrive, it feels like what would become Spider-Man. Like the bones of the movement and mechanics from the Spider-Man games come from that. So they are known for their mechanics and whatnot. So the problem with Spider-Man 2 is not with the mechanics, not with the gameplay. It's with the characters, the setting, the plot, and whatnot. I think the setting is amazing. I think they do a great job. Now, it's weird how you cannot pick the times of day you want New York to be, so you're kind of really stuck in a more so narrow, narrative focused game than like the first one. You are really playing through a catered story in this one. I guess more so than the last game, but I like that. There's more going on in this game. They don't have the Sinister Six, but there's more layers to the story and in the plot. So I actually like it. I think they do a good job with it. Now, going back to just the Game of the Year discussion, I don't think it's going to make it. It might be top 3 or it might be 4 when it comes down to it, but really I think it's going to be between RE4, Alan Wake 2, and Baldur's Gate 3, and I don't think it's any contest because Baldur's Gate 3 is just going to probably sweep. Last thing before we talk spoilers for Spider-Man, I want to check out Tears of the Kingdom OpenCritic. I don't see it on here for some reason. It's got a 96 on Metacritic. IGN I know, gave it a 10 out of 10. It got 10s out of 10s everywhere. Game Informer gave it a 9.75. That's kind of weird. Just give it a 10. Okay. Tears of the Kingdom on Open Critic. Oh! 96? Okay. What? Okay, anyways. Open Critic. Tears of the Kingdom got a 96. Baldur's Gate. Critic average is 96, but critics recommend 99%. Okay, so I see where they're getting that from. So, Tears of the Kingdom would be at a 97%. So, I almost don't see Tears of the Kingdom being in there because its sequel is so almost one-to-one with Breath of the Wild, except they just add a lot of new mechanics, and they have, instead of it being a one map, they have like 3 maps. They have a map above it and below it, if you know what I mean, if you played the game. But it still kind of seems samey. Same thing with Spider-Man 2. I don't think it's samey, like I just kind of explained, but I don't think it's in the running. So Mario Bros. Wonder, it's still samey, even though they have a very fun gimmick in it that switches up the formula. But it's not, in terms of, you know, production value and, you know, a reimagining and improvement of mechanics, you know, the same as a Baldur's Gate 3 or Alan Wake 2 or RE4. Especially because when Spider-Man 2 came out, there were some bugs in it that did hold it back. So I see, like I said, I'm going to say Baldur's Gate 3. Anyways, those are some of the biggest games of the year. I'll talk about Spider-Man spoilers real quick. So, people have an issue with the story with Harry becoming Venom. I get it. But it's not like a TV show or like an animated series. You don't have all these, you know, episodes to flesh out an Eddie Brock character or to do something different with Harry Osborn. You know, like they even introduced Carnage in this game in a very, you know, early, you know, introduction of Cletus Cassidy through a side story. So they try to set things up in this, but they don't have all the time in the world. This game doesn't really take that long to beat too, but they kind of keep it a more condensed story where Kraven is hunting down, you know, a worthy adversary. I'm not going to go over the, you know, the synopsis, but it's an interesting, you know, dynamic that goes between, you know, Harry / Venom, Peter / Miles, and Kraven, where it's these 3, you know, beasts. You know, think about Kraven. He's killing the Sinister Six, searching for a worthy adversary. Then he finds Peter. Peter can't, you know, isn't a worthy adversary enough until he gets Venom in him. Then he gets Venom. He becomes, you know, super powerful, but then he realizes, you know, the, you know, typical story, he can't have Venom, so it's corrupting him, so he separates with it. It goes back to Harry, and then it turns into this beast that ends up killing Kraven and turning the city into a symbiote, you know, hive mind. In the city, basically, the last act is it's an alien invasion of symbiotes in New York. The last act is very action heavy, and I think it's some of the best moments in the game in terms of, you know, story and action colliding, because when you fight Venom and the symbiotes, it is insane. I mean, you have some very fun moments between, you know, Kraven and between Miles and Peter, especially like when you're Miles and you have to fight Peter with the symbiote. I think that's one of the coolest boss battles. I think the boss battle with Lee, when Kraven, you know, captures Lee and Miles and he has them fight to the death, I think that's one of the coolest story moments and gameplay moments. Fighting Lee as a boss battle was so fun. Kraven was an easy boss battle. I don't know, for me it was super easy. Venom wasn't that easy, but it was a very emotional moment. They balanced the fighting, you know, the boss battles in this game with story moments better than almost any game I've ever seen. Like when you fight the lizard, it's like a 20-minute boss battle because you're going from the sewer up to the street, up to a skyscraper, then back down into the sewer. It spans, all over the city, all over Harlem, I think. And it's just a fun boss battle. So I really like what they do with this, where it feels not convoluted, because it's not in a bad way. There's a lot going on, and they manage it very well. To me, it doesn't feel bloated. I think a lot of people think that it feels bloated from what I see. It just kind of doesn't make sense. It doesn't tie together well. But I think the only issue with that is the pacing, and it's hard to do that pacing when you're also trying to establish this open world game. If it was just a narrative, linear game, the pacing would have felt better. But then you wouldn't have had the open world that we all expect, them to be in New York, this open world. So I think you see when it gets into these linear moments, it becomes an absolutely amazing game. But then you stop, and it's like, oh, here's a Mysterio mission. Here's a Mysterium you got to do. What? This doesn't really fit because Mysterio isn't in the main story. Or like the Cletus Cassidy side missions. They're fun, but they don't fit in the overall story. But they kind of stop, and they introduce Wraith. They introduce, what is it, Scream. MJ turns into a symbiote, and they kind of have this, open world kind of moment that turns linear, and it's like, oh, I want more of this, but then you go back to this open world. So it's a balance that is more so like, are you a fan of Spider-Man in this game's formula? If you are, you're gonna love it. If you're not, if this isn't really your cup of tea, it's just going to be like another PlayStation exclusive that gets in the upper 80s, low 90s, that just misses out on Game of the Year. And we've seen that happen, let's say 2016 or, 2020. What was Game of the Year 2020? Last of Us Part 2. So not really what I was talking about. I was talking about Ghost of Tsushima that year. But anyways, what was 2022's Game of the Year? Elden Ring. So that was, I guess, a year right there where it's like God of War Ragnarok. It suffered from this same thing that I'm talking about with Spider-Man. I think maybe God of War does it a little bit better than Spider-Man 2, even though I really didn't like God of War Ragnarok compared to Spider-Man 2. But that might just be an extreme, superhero comic book bias right there. But it kind of falls into more so the Insomniac PlayStation exclusive formula here, instead of being a Spider-Man game. Because if you look at it and play it as a Spider-Man game, it's so comic booky, if I can use that term. It is a comic book game, but if you look at it as this overall amazing video game, there's going to be fallbacks because they're trying to keep Spider-Man, lore and Spider-Man characters and Spider-Man things in the game. So those are my favorite parts of the game, but I think in terms of a Game of the Year, an overall video game, those are the places where it falls. However, this is a game where I'm already calling it underrated. I think this game is going to be underrated in terms of its fan reception. These outlets are going to give it crazy reviews because it deserves it in terms of what they accomplish. But when I talk about it being underrated, I think it's going to be underrated in terms of a Spider-Man story. Like the Sam Raimi trilogy, Spider-Man 3. I think that's underrated in terms of a Spider-Man story. It's not the best adaptation of Venom, but I think it's a good story, but a bad movie. And I think this is going to be one of those games where it's like, people are like, oh, it's not as good as the first one. Well, I think it's a better Spider-Man story than the first one, but it's not as a better game, if that makes sense. I think that's kind of what my hot take is for this with Spider-Man 2. I think it's an amazing Spider-Man 2 story with the Lizard. Amazing. Kraven. Amazing. Venom. Amazing. You got some amazing villains in this. And I'm not even talking about Doc Ock or Green Goblin, who are some of Spider-Man's biggest villains, but they made a very compelling story with Miles, Peter, MJ versus a Craven invasion into New York and a symbiote infestation in New York. I think it's going to become, in 5-10 years, we're going to look back on Insomniac Spider-Man 2 and say, wow, that was an underappreciated game from a story perspective when it comes to Spider-Man games and stories, because it was special. It's a send-off to Peter. They say that Insomniac says that in their games, Miles is going to become the main Spider-Man from here, going forward. And I think Peter's whole character arc in this story is underappreciated now and underrated now. But in the future, we're going to look back and say that what they did in terms of character development for some of these characters and overall story is going to be looked at as, oh wow, that was actually pretty good. Because I think right now people are overlooking the story of this game. It's actually great. So that is episode 32 of the Senate podcast. Hope you enjoyed. It's tough getting on here by myself, but it just worked out today like that. So hope you enjoyed me talking about some of the biggest games of 2023. Dead Space, I think, should have been in there over RE4. That's a personal opinion. 2023. We're gonna look at 2023 video games because this list is honestly kind of strange. Starfield doesn't belong. Pikmin doesn't belong. Armored Core, okay, nah. Redfall, absolutely not. Jedi Survivor and Hogwarts Legacy got overlooked. I think Hogwarts Legacy had a chance at being in here over Mario Wonder, and I see that sentiment out there, on Twitter and in the ether, that games like maybe a Sea of Stars or a Hogwarts Legacy should have been in there over Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and I could see that. I think Jedi Survivor kind of got lost in just the amount of amazing games we had this year. And then last but not least, last thing I want to say is Final Fantasy 16. I think Final Fantasy 16 definitely deserved to be in the nominees for Game of the Year 2023. I think you look at this list of the 6 official nominees, and there is a big, omission here, which is Final Fantasy 16. So, we can take out and put in and swap places with, games, because there were just so many this year. But, this year was a year of amazing games, top 8, top 10. I think this is probably the best year ever for video games. So there's a lot we can talk about. But anyways, my personal game of the year, that's a tough one. I don't know yet. I think it's too early to decide. It's November. We haven't had time with some of these games. So anyways, that's my take on 2023. To the best of my ability here in these 30 minutes we had talking. So anyways, if you got this far, thank you for listening. What's your game of the year? What do you think about 2023? And yeah, with that, thank you for listening. Stay tuned for maybe a few more episodes of the Senate podcast. We'll see what we're going to do, but we're on YouTube, the Senate podcast. We're on Spotify, the Senate podcast, Apple Podcast, and go follow us on Twitter. And Tony will be linked, my co-host. He'll be in the description. This article will be in the description, along with other episodes that you should check out. So anyways, thanks for listening. Hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving. And this is the holiday season, so enjoy games while you're on these holiday breaks. And we'll see you back here next time for hopefully episode 33. So have a good one, guys.